Hey guys, we are in Matthew 27 and Mark 15 today, looking at two of the Gospels, crucifixion of Jesus. The first thing that stood out to me today was verse 4, where Judas feels remorse, but he doesn't repent. And he acknowledges sin, but he doesn't surrender, right? This worldly sorrow versus godly repentance, and it ended up eating him alive, and he went and hung himself, We can, when we feel that remorse, we can just come to Jesus and be forgiven. We can just, that's how you go and make it right, not going back by your own standards and doing what you think you need to do to make it right, but going into repentance to be free from that guilt. And then I love the line here that the religious leaders give, where they're like, what is that to us? So cold. And it's just man, religion without relationship, right? Wow, that is harsh. It just shows where their heart was at. And then verse 14 was my next one. It said, but he gave him no answer, not even a single charge. So the governor was greatly amazed. And what stood out to me in that was just how self-control really does speak louder than self-justification. There really is no point in trying to reason with somebody who's set in their mind. And Jesus just gives us this really beautiful, perfect example of the power of holding your tongue and just staying self-controlled, not letting your emotions get the best of you. And Jesus is going to take that all the way through to the cross, which is just incredible to me. Verse 18 was the next one that stood out to me, that verse 18, their envy was so obvious. Even Pilate saw that they were envious. And so I was curious of what the Hebrew meaning of that envy is, because I always felt like envy was jealousy. And so I was I wonder if it's the same thing. And so it does mean jealousy, but also spite and ill will. So it was deeper than simple jealousy is what it was saying, that it was bitterness that resents another's goodness, that it wasn't about wanting what someone else had. It's being disturbed that they have it at all. So it's way deeper than just jealousy. And in verse 19 of Matthew, this portion here, where he was sitting there and his wife sent saying, have nothing to do with this righteous man, for I've been suffering in a dream. That is only in the Gospel of Matthew. And I always try to do that when I'm reading them side by side like this. I'll always do this at Easter time, and then I'll do it with Jesus' birth at Christmas time, where I'll read all the Gospels side by side, kind of pulling out the differences and getting just a bigger picture of it. And so I love when I find little spots like that where it's strictly for that specific gospel. Okay, verse 23 was the next one that stood out to me. And he said, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted even more, let him be crucified. And I'm how insane is this? That this is proof that there was no logic in this. Even Pilate, who's just Roman citizen, he doesn't know about any of the prophecies, about any of the Jewish rules. He's just this doesn't even make logical sense, right? Logic, truth, justice was gone. It was gone. And it was obvious. Verse 27, this one, guys, I had one huge thing in each of these chapters that blew my mind. And this right here in my study Bible was talking about it. And I was what? So this is really, really, really good. 27, the soldiers took Jesus, right? And they stripped him and they put on the crown of thorns, okay? Guys, the thorns symbolize the curse of sin. Back in Genesis 18, let me read this to you. I wrote it out in my notes for you because I'm oh my gosh, I didn't I knew the crown of thorns was mocking him as a king. I had no idea that he was wearing the very curse of sin on his head. That it says in Genesis 3:17 through 18, cursed be the ground because of you. In pain shall you eat of it and all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And it goes on. Literally, that was the curse the ground had for the sin of Adam and Eve in the garden. And he's wearing it like he wore the curse so we could wear the crown. Like, what? So my mind was blown this morning with that particularly. As you can tell, I'm like still amazed that I'm like on fire for it, and it's been a long day and I'm still like, oh yeah, get this part. It was so good. Okay. Also 45 was the next one that stood out to me of this darkness. I've heard somebody try to argue that it was an eclipse, which doesn't work, because Passover was always during a full moon and eclipses can only happen at the new moon. So it was a supernatural act of God. It was not an eclipse. We don't need to try to put logic to what God does, because there's no logic to the seas parting. There's no logic for the earth flooding, how they have found ocean creatures at like mountaintops. Scientists have found them because of the flood. And it's like literally history and science prove his existence. It's so good. And all these stories, it proves the Bible. It's amazing. How many people were trying to disprove God through science, through history, only to find God, because it's like literally, there's no way you can explain some of these things. Okay, verse 50 is the next one where Jesus yields up his spirit of just Jesus in total control is what I love about this part, that he chose that exact moment that, and then after that even nature was testifying to him, right? You have this earthquake, you have this darkness, you have this curtain torn, which by the way, that curtain torn, that's separated. So if you remember back in Old Testament, when we've learned about the temple and the tabernacle and this veil that covered, and only the highest priest could go into this space only on one day a year. And that was it. Because remember, one of his, what's his name, sons went in there and then they like instantly died, because you're like literally not allowed to go in there. And so this space that no one could enter besides the high priest, nobody could enter it, was torn, breaking that up, breaking that separation between God and humanity, right? That it just, the veil open and the holy and most holy was now removed, this barrier that was made, because now we have direct access. We have direct access. This is why I'm like super, super, super passionate about knowing that you don't have to go to anybody or do anything to go to God and get forgiveness. Nothing. He tore the veil on purpose. The rock split to show you now nothing stands between. Jesus is that bridge. There is no more separation. We can just go right to the Father, which is so beautiful. Like that's what he did on the cross. We can't take that from him. That's what he did on the cross. We now have direct access. Okay, 52. The power of Jesus's death that unleashes life, right? Like tombs broke open and dead men start walking. From my understanding in the Hebrew text of these, they weren't like zombies. They were like a resurrected body. I don't have a way of explaining that other than, again, a supernatural power. But Jesus fulfilled in John 11:25 that I am the resurrection and the life is what came to mind there, that fulfillment of that promise. But Matthew here is jumping ahead because he says that the tombs broke, but then he says when Jesus resurrected, then they were all walking around. So he's like jumping ahead, even though he's telling in that time, which makes it even more confusing. But we could just be in awe of it. Okay, verse 54 of chapter 27 here, the Centron who claims truly this was the Son of God. I love it. I love it. I love it that he wasn't Jewish. He wasn't a follower of Jesus. When the earth shook and the sky was dark and Jesus cried in this power, even they recognized this wasn't ordinary. That was their normal thing. Is centrons were leaders of about 100 other Roman soldiers, and it was normal to do these deaths and these crucifixions. They saw tons of them. They saw tons of it. And they even saw this and knew this wasn't ordinary. This was not ordinary. They'd never seen anything like it, where he says and confesses at the cross, truly this was the Son of God. Guys, do you see this? This is the first Gentile to confess their faith in Jesus at the cross, the very first one. How amazing is that? And then 66, is my last one for this chapter. So they went and made a tomb secure by sealing the stones and setting up guards. And I just love how God allowed them to stack all odds against him. I feel like he almost prompted them to try to make sure it couldn't happen just to show his power. I'm like, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Jumping over to Matthew 15 now. We see again the crucifixion. So Mark is continually pointing to blame the Jews for all of it. I think it's kind of comical actually how Mark really highlights that it's these chief priests who all of this fall on. It was definitely them in verse 11, how he says, but the chief priests stirred up the crowds. So not just the crowd stirred up and Pilate, he's like, no, those priests, it was them. They were behind the whole thing. And he points over and over in his gospel, which I kind of find funny. Verse 16, it says the soldiers led him away into the place and called together the whole battalion. Guys, that's 600 men, a battalion. 600 men came, and just the brutality is so heartbreaking, isn't it? Isn't it heartbreaking? It's almost difficult to read because it's just man, even if it wasn't Jesus, even if this is a criminal, how brutal and horrible to treat somebody this way. It's wow. And then you just add on top of it being Jesus, right? Okay. So in Mark for me today, there was two people who stood out, who I kind of did a deep dive with, because for some reason I really was just sitting with these people and who they were and trying to understand them deeper. So I went through researching Simon. So 21 brings in Simon. Okay, what do all the Gospels say about him? What do we really know about Simon? The other one was Joseph, who had the tomb that I'll talk about later. But Simon, so he was an African Jew by title, and they compelled him, meaning they forced him to do this. So sometimes, and what came to mind in this was how sometimes our interruptions in our day, because that's not what he was expecting to do, our interruptions are invitations into God's purpose. This was the plan he had for Simon. Simon didn't know it when he came to town for Passover. He didn't know it. But there's this interruption that happens, and he gets to carry the cross. I'm sure at the time he wouldn't have said, get to. And me and my husband did this one year. We wanted to just change our perspective, and we started to say, I don't want to say the words I have to for anything. I want to always say I get to. And we spent the whole year every time. And if he forget or if I forgot, we would correct each other of, oh, you mean you get to? You get to? You get to change the baby's diaper? You get to clean poop off your floor? You get to? You see what I'm saying? It changes your perspective of things that are really hard and challenging, and putting it in the right perspective of how blessed you really are. You know, how there's a blessing in all of it, how God is so purposeful. And here with Simon, he comes in alignment with God's amazing thing that is going this monumental moment of Christian faith for the world, for all of Jews. And he was a Jew. This was turning point. He got to carry this cross, this interruption, which was an invitation to his purpose, which is super cool. And then verse 29, that many passed by. I heard this taught once, and it blew my mind. And this isn't my mind-blowing one in Mark. It's coming. It's even better than this. But I've heard this talked, and it blew my mind when I heard about it, how the place that it talks about was actually just outside the city wall. So it's not like a big mountain, as you see in pictures, how they always have this mountain and Jesus and the three crosses, are up there. It was actually a small mound right outside of the city gates. And so it was near the main road. And the point of Romans doing that, and so it would shame the people on the cross. And so since this was Passover, there was a ton of people coming into town to go to temple for that one day a year, that big sacrifice for the Passover meal. So all of them are flocking in, more than usual, coming right past Jesus on the cross. So it was main spot, right when you're entering in. You cannot miss it. All of them had to walk past Jesus. Isn't that crazy? Okay, then verse 30, I was thinking how incredible it is that through all these insults that they're hurling at him, so all these people are coming into town, going to temple to sacrifice, they're all coming into town, and they're all hurling insults at him. Insults at him, okay? So all of them are hurling these insults. Can you imagine the pain Jesus was in? So he went through He went through getting beaten. He went through like walking to this space, being flogged, all of these things. Then he's up on the cross in probably the worst pain any human being could ever bear. Like no human being could probably bear it. Only Jesus could, probably. It was so excruciating, this pain. And they're hurling insults. And even in his deepest pain, he still didn't allow anger to come out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm amazed at this because, I mean, you know, when you have like a migraine, like a really bad headache, and your kids are just being crazy and you like snap because you're like, okay, I am done. Okay. But Jesus didn't. He just stayed there. He didn't hurl a single insult back. He didn't yell at them. He didn't say stop. He said nothing. I'm like, what? Like, for some reason, that was just like, I had to like literally pause and just sit in that of like, wow, God, you are so good. Like the amount of inner peace that Jesus had to have, knowing what this was for, to be able to still stay silent. And I mean, even in, I think it was not in one of the ones today, so maybe it's in Luke, because we didn't read it today, where he says, forgive them, they know not what they do. So like, even blesses them on top of it. Like, oh, Jesus is so good. Okay, here's the one for Mark 15, that was my mind-blowing moment, okay? That, which I've known little pieces of this, but this like totally took it next level, is how the 9th hour is when he died. The 9th hour, which would have been 3 p.m. That I knew. And I thought, okay, that's cool. But we say he yielded up his spirit then. And I'm like, wait, that's not random then. He chose that hour and it was not random. So what was at 3 o'clock? Right? So my curiosity then gets me diving into that. 3 o'clock, guys. I am like so amazed at this. 3 o'clock was the time of evening sacrifice and when they would slaughter the lamb for the Passover meal. So while they were in temple, those priests who crucified him, while they were in temple sacrificing the lamb for people's sin outside the city on a Roman cross, is the Lamb of God who was offered once and for all, who was literally yielded up his spirit. That same time. What? The same time. How insane is that? I'm just like, what? How did I not know this? How is this not taught at the church? Why has my church not talked about this yet? I will be writing my pastor for the next Easter service. Don't you know, know that I will, because that is insane to me that at 3 o'clock, when they would have been doing this and offering the sacrifice for all their sins, Jesus offered the sacrifice for all the sins. For good, and it's done. And I'm like, wow, mic drop Jesus. So good. Okay, my last thing I had for you guys today was my deep dive now on this Joseph, which, I mean, it's going to be lame after I just talked about that because that was so amazing. But Joseph was the next one that I'm like, okay, what do all 4 Gospels say about Joseph? I want to get into one place and get a really good look of who he was. So, and it says this word took courage. So I highlighted that because that was something that really stood out in that part for me, that he took courage. Like, what does that, like, why did it take courage for him to go before Pilate? I'm not sure. So that was kind of where the angle I was looking at it for. So in all 4 Gospels, he is mentioned, and he's a wealthy man, influence. He has a lot of influence we see in these Gospels, a member of council. And guys, the one that they list here, that's the same member of council that condemned Jesus, which I thought that was really interesting when I pulled that one out. That he's good, righteous, a heart turned towards God, it says here. He secretly was a disciple of Jesus. It made me think maybe of like Nicodemus, which this is interesting because in, I think Luke it is, Nicodemus helps him take him off the cross. So I think him and Nicodemus, who were in this higher council, who were secretly followers of Jesus. Nicodemus was the one, if you don't remember, he's the one who asked Jesus, how do I get this? And he says, you have to be born again. He's like, well, how can you be born again? You have to like go back into the womb. And Jesus is like, no. And he like, you know what I'm talking about? Like that's Nicodemus. Okay. So, they were part of the same council, which is interesting, right? And that's the council that condemned Jesus. So anyways, he was secretly his disciple, Jesus' disciple. And it says here that he boldly asked asked for Jesus's body. And so what was the dangers? And I was like, okay, what were the dangers in that it was bold, and it was that association with a criminal would destroy his reputation, that touching a dead body, making him unclean during Passover, like literally during Passover, so he wouldn't have been able to partake in the meal. And it was rare for Pilate to ever release a body. Like, so it was actually like not normal for Pilate to do that. People would have been shocked that he did that, because he didn't do that. Like, that's not something Pilate did. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. See how great it is when you learn about that time in history. It kind of expands your understanding of the gospel and makes you more amazed at what God was doing. So courage here, the word here, the Greek word for this meant to dare boldly, to act fearlessly despite danger is what it was meaning. So Joseph went from this secret disciple to public devotion, guys. Isn't that beautiful? He was this secret follower, and when he's looking at Jesus here on the cross, this man that he did believe in, that he, even though he was secret about it, he saw this. He's like, I cannot help myself. I have to do this public devotion. I need it. I need to take him down. I need to wrap him. Like, look at the tenderness, how he wraps him so gently and puts him in this tomb. Like, it's so beautiful. Joseph used his wealth, his influence, and his courage to honor Jesus. And isn't that beautiful that he's throughout all 4 gospels for what he did? Okay, that's what I have for you guys today. We'll see you tomorrow.